Do you remember Old Thing? Huh, that's right, Old Thing from Good Time. Old Thing reliable and simple. Not like New Thing, so different. Old Thing still make happy. Buy Old Thing today.
Listen, I love Old Thing. That stuff makes me happy. But when so many brands and franchises today, like our beloved Dungeons & Dragons, are just suckling on our nostalgia for their greatest hits, the more they tend to water down that old thing and our hope that the next new thing will be any good. Just look at the reception for the newest version of D&D's classics, Spelljammer, Planescape, Dragonlance, and now the first big book for D&D 5.5 is Ravenloft again, the game-changing gothic horror setting from 1983. So if the question is, can D&D survive on nostalgia? The answer is yes, but I don't think it can survive eating itself in the long term and might even struggle to thrive in the short term compared to the recent explosive success of some new tabletop publishers leaning on nostalgia in different ways. Because for all our interests, but on this channel for fantasy TTRPGs, we should be able to honor the past while embracing the present and having fun with what we've got, while also being hopeful about the future and what's to come. So, what the heck is nostalgia anyway, and why do companies seem to be weaponizing it more than ever in the age of AI? We usually think of nostalgia as the warm and fuzzy, familiar feeling tied to a song, a game, a book, or a place where we made good memories. And usually, that's because we were a lot younger and our lives were not yet burdened by so much responsibility or so much knowledge of how freaking jacked up the world can be. So nostalgia is like the desire to experience old thing once more as a pleasant escape from the burdens of today. And that lines up pretty well with the second part of this formal definition. A wistful or sentimental yearning for a return to or the return of some real or romanticized past period or some irrevocable past condition or setting. But what I appreciate about that definition is how it more clearly emphasizes the fantastical nature of nostalgia. Because we often look upon the past with rose-colored glasses, a less critical view than of the present, and a less anxious view than of the future. In other words, we tend to forgive or forget the parts of the past that we worried about before they happened, or that we didn't really enjoy at the time. More on that later when we discuss the true nature of classic D&D adventures. But today, the corporations in charge of what were the popular intellectual properties during those simpler days, they are ever more likely to cash in on our nostalgic emotions because it works and because it's all AI can do. First, you know the drill. Every 20 or 30 years, old thing becomes cool again because the people old enough to feel nostalgia for it now have a little disposable income, and to the young people, it's brand new, baby. I collected Pokemon cards as a kid around the year 2000, sold it all for nothing around 2015, and starting around 2025, adult men are scalping and hoarding new Pokemon card packs like they're made of gold. This is the same cycle of popularity that helped Stranger Things and D&D simultaneously become cool again in the mid to late 2010s when suddenly the 80s were back. So if this cycle has happened over and over again for decades, what does AI have to do with this? What am I getting at here? As you know, artificial intelligence can only mock. It cannot make, not new, real things of its own. At least for the time being, it makes amalgams of existing content, but rarely if ever in a way that feels original or inspired. And in this age where every huge corporation is heavily investing in AI technology and therefore eager to make it actually profitable, they need us to want and to buy nostalgic amalgams of existing content like never before. But also, don't get me twisted, that's me talking about the increasing general trend. I'm not saying that any of your favorite RPG publishers are using AI. For all the CEOs talk above D&D about loving artificial intelligence, he's been very clear that they do not use AI in the production of D&D because fans don't want it. And I'm definitely not saying every new take on an old thing is bad. We're gonna look at amazing examples of new, nostalgia-based tabletop RPG books like Shadowdark, Neon Odyssey, Ravenloft, and my own RPG, right after a particularly poignant example from today's awesome sponsor. Memory Core, low poly tabletop RPG. Clearly inspired by retro video games, the box set includes a user manual of the core rules and up to 6 games with unique additional mechanics. There's Solid State Machine for action stealth, Overdrive Crew for street racing, Final Tournament for combo breaking bouts, Extinction Protocol zombie shooter, Corebound Chronicles for classic JRPG, and Bloodsong Hunters of the Night described as Metroidvania. Each designed to recreate the feel of a masterpiece game series from the 32-bit era, containing its own mini rulebook and scenario, pre-gen character boards, fold-out map, memory cards for gear, and a special disc tracker. For example, the Solid State Tracker notes the alert level of nearby guard patrols. The main user manual even explains how to create your own games and content with fun advice about leaning into video game logic and claiming that each box needs 0 prep to get started. Even this prototype looks great, and you can check out a free quick start today on BackerKit through my link below so they know who sent you. And here's a really overdue nature break. This is what actual poison ivy looks like. Leaves of 3, as they say, and they tend to have these big chunky teeth. See those edges kind of chopped up? Versus right next door, oh, there's leaves of 3, but look at how smooth that edge is, or rather, that's the wrong terminology. It does have a very fine-toothed edge. And uh-oh, here's some kind of chunky teeth, but that's Virginia Creeper, leaves of 5. And a lot like Virginia Creeper, poison ivy is also famously able to grow as a vine. And if you do make skin contact with poison ivy, as long as you really scrub it with soap and water within, I think, 12 hours or so, you're also gonna be good. Alright, this might sound like a hot take, but it's just true, right? That the entire tabletop old school Renaissance movement is nostalgia bait. But it's the good kind. Kind of like how people will defend clickbait as long as you deliver on the promise, in that case, old school fantasy, it's fine. So black and white artwork, cool. Themes of pulpy, grounded swords and sorcery, cool. Often brutal, survival-based gameplay, JK, that's cool. And guess when it started? Around 2010, 20 to 30 years after D&D's popularity peak in the 1980s, now by some dudes in the lost forums of Google+, chatting about those glory days and how to use the then new D&D open gaming license to bring them back. One of my favorite games, Dungeon Crawl Classics, came out of that early OSR era around 2012, and funny enough, it recently came under fire for being too true to its roots. D&D uses not only the art style, but also the walls of text writing style, typical of classic RPG rulebooks and adventures designed for game masters to read as pros on their own time. And the argument was that this style was never good. And so today, it's wildly outdated, and most OSR games and adventures today are designed with minimalist presentation for utility at the table with little to no prep necessary, like my current favorite game to design for, Shadowdark. Now, obviously, that is all opinion, and it did come off as a hot take, kind of, sparked a little controversy, whoa. Obviously, lots of people prefer the DCC version because that company is successful and because it worked for, 30 or 40 years. But when it comes to running material, I do prefer a more minimalist approach, and that is why Shadowdark is one of my favorites. So, this is one of the ethical nostalgia bait indie success stories you must know about. The designer built up a grassroots player base for years by publishing 5e content and playtesting their own game at conventions, and then struck while the iron was hot. In the wake of the D&D open gaming license scandal of 2023, Shadowdark launched and made a cool $1 million, then won the main Annie Awards at Gen Con, and then made $2 or $3 million from their first expansion book Kickstarter, and recently ranked at number 5 5 among 800 games in my poll for favorite TTRPG with over 30,000 votes. And at the same time, the creator of Shadowdark has been pretty clear that they weren't aiming for innovation. The slogan is old school gaming modernized. It took the elegant core mechanics of D&D 5e, wove them into classic concepts of swords and sorcery survival-based gameplay with fresh takes on character design, and epitomized by its real-time 1-hour torches, then laid it all out in a beautiful book as a game that is easy to learn, play, run, and design for. But now, imagine, if you will, the exact opposite of Shadowdark. Colorful, bright, futuristic, but hopeful, heroic, and simply electric. That is Neon Odyssey, the brand new #1 third-party D&D 5e project of all time on Kickstarter, earning an out-of-this-world 13 million buckaroonies at the time of making this video. And dear lord, some of the marketing material was so laden with nostalgia bait that I almost found it to be too much. The first music video I saw, all great music by the way, seems to reference, in alphabetical order, Avatar, Back to the Future, Cowboy Bebop, Doctor Who, Dune, Five Nights at Freddy's, for some reason, F-Zero/Captain Falcon and/or Mario Kart, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Metroid, Pokemon and/or Alien, Portal, Star Fox, Star Trek probably, Star Wars, Super Mario, Treasure Planet, Tron, and War of the Worlds. So with that being my first impression of Neon Odyssey, yeah, it almost seemed like that slurry of existing content I was complaining about that AI makes. But of course, what their regular fans know, and what I was able to easily find out by going to the page and just skimming at some of the materials actually being offered here, there is so much detail and care, and call me humanist, but I really think it is that level of care and attention to detail that can take an amalgam of ideas and push it through to the other side of being original. And it certainly helps that we haven't seen anything of this nature, or at least of this scale, yet compatible with D&D 5e. So when I was chatting about this on Discord with some other content creators and indie publishers, the main topic was how insanely fresh Neon Odyssey looks and feels compared to anything D&D has done in a little while, especially with Ravenloft again being the hot new product on the horizon. However, Ravenloft, again, is fortunately super reductive. I was able to chat virtually with some of the designers who confirmed that this book is definitely not just a 5.5 conversion of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft from a few years ago. Any of the character options and even setting info that appears in both books has been refreshed. But before I say anything else, disclaimer that they are apparently sending me a free review copy soon. No, they're not paying me actual money or anything. Same goes for Neon Odyssey and Shadowdark, but take that as you will. And if you're interested in more of a deep dive on that book after it, hopefully arrives, let me know in the comments. Overall, I think one of the problems with nostalgic reboots that makes me question Ravenloft but give Shadowdark and Neon Odyssey a pass is when it feels corporate versus lovingly made by a fan. So when I heard from the designers and learned that one of them, Wes Schneider, started his writing and game design career decades ago homebrewing Ravenloft material, and that he was later an editor on Dragon magazine in the early 2000s, he was the lead designer on Van Richten's Guide, and pitched the idea for Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, aka D&D's most original and underrated book in 5th edition, it became clear that while rebooting Ravenloft may technically be corporate, it is also a lovingly made fan adaptation. And guys, let's not act like the 1983 Ravenloft gothic horror vampire tragedy was super original either. See Dracula by Bram Stoker. And the one other thing I promised to mention was my own RPG. Some of you know that last year I published the playtest version of a simple, super simple, D6 based Pokemon inspired RPG. I don't actually have an update on that yet, but it's obviously just like based on my pure nostalgia for that game, so it felt worth at least mentioning here. But back to D&D nostalgia and Shadowdark Homebrew, if you'd like to see how D&D's new starter set, Heroes of the Borderlands, changed the 1980 classic Keep on the Borderlands adventure, and how I remixed them both into a free Shadowdark one-pager, check out this video on your screen. Thanks again to our sponsor and to my amazing patrons and YouTube members who make all of this possible. Keep building.